Welcome to a very special edition of The Deep Dive.
Yeah, a really exciting one today.
It really is. And if you're tuning in right now, we've actually crafted this journey specifically for you, the MBA candidate.
Exactly.
Whether you're, prepping for a high-stakes seminar or trying to get a leg up on your cohort or just fiercely curious about the underlying mechanics of the corporate world, you are absolutely in the right place.
You really are. And we are embarking on a pretty massive, highly anticipated mission today.
Oh, massive.
No.
Because this deep dive marks the very first in a special chapter-by-chapter series covering a true foundational text in the field. I'm talking about Henry Mintzberg, Bruce Allstrand, and Joseph Lample's Strategy Safari.
A classic.
A total classic. And today, our focus is squarely on Chapter 1. We're setting out to get a bird's-eye view of this wild, completely untamed beast that we call strategic management.
Untamed is the perfect word for it.
Right. So think of this not as digesting some dry, theoretical framework, but as a thrilling expedition through the corporate jungle. We've got our boots laced up, our maps are folded out, and we are hunting big game.
We definitely are. And it truly is an untamed environment out there. But, before we can even begin to conquer this beast of strategy, we kind of have to start with a rather humbling admission.
Humbling.
Yeah, especially for folks in business school accustomed to having all the answers. We have to admit that, fundamentally, the business world doesn't really fully agree on what this beast actually is yet.
Wow.
The field of strategic management is just vast. It's highly complex, and it is utterly full of contradictions. To navigate it successfully, you first need to understand the sheer scale of the unknown.
Okay, let's unpack this because that feels like a strange place to start a business textbook.
It does, yeah.
Usually Chapter 1 gives you a neat, tidy definition to memorize, right? But Strategy Safari uses a very different framing device. It leans on the famous fable of the blind men and the elephant.
Yes, specifically the poetic version by John Godfrey Sachs.
Right, so the premise is simple. You have 6 blind men from Indistan, and they encounter an elephant for the very first time.
Never seen one before.
Never. So since none of them can perceive the whole animal, they rely entirely on their limited sense of touch.
And they all touch a different part.
Exactly. One hits the broadside and he calls it a wall.
Makes sense.
Another grabs the smooth tusk and declares it a spear.
Right.
The trunk is a snake. The knee is a tree. The ear feels like a fan, and the tail feels like a rope.
And then chaos ensues.
Complete chaos. They end up in this furious argument with the punchline being that while every single one of them is partly right, all of them are completely in the wrong.
What's fascinating here is how profound an illustration of human perception that is, and it maps flawlessly onto the corporate landscape you are preparing to enter.
How so?
Well, in the business world, we are those blind men. Strategy formation is our elephant. You will see this constantly in your career. Everyone touches just one part of the strategic process.
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
Right. A marketing executive has a firm grip on the trunk. A finance director is holding the tusk. An operations manager is hugging the knee.
And they all think they have the whole picture.
Exactly. Quite dangerously, they argue that their specific domain, their narrow functional perspective, represents the entirety of the beast. So they draft their departmental plans in complete isolation.
It's the classic silo problem.
The ultimate silo problem.
You have the marketing team arguing that strategy is entirely about brand positioning and customer acquisition.
And meanwhile,
the finance team insists it's purely about capital allocation and maximizing shareholder value. They're both touching the same animal, but they're yelling at each other across the boardroom about walls and snakes.
the core lesson here is that you cannot comprehend the whole elephant simply by adding up its parts.
A fan plus a rope plus a tree does not magically equal a living, breathing elephant.
No, it doesn't. An organization is a complex system that is vastly greater than the sum of its functional departments. However, and this is the crucial caveat for any future leader to comprehend the whole, you absolutely must understand those individual parts.
You can't just ignore them.
You can't just ignore the trunk or the tusks because they seem too tactical. You need all those limited perspectives to even begin constructing an accurate picture of the reality on the ground.
Okay, so we have to know the parts, but we cannot mistake the part for the whole. That makes conceptual sense.
Good.
But if strategy is this massive, confusing animal, how do we actually define it for practical use? Because if you walk into any boardroom today and ask a manager to define their strategy, they will almost always give you a forward-looking definition.
Always.
They'll tell you it's a roadmap. It's their grand plan for the next 5 years.
That is the textbook reflex for most executives.
Yeah.
So it's only half the story.
Only half.
If you sit that exact same manager down and ask them, hey, forget your glossy deck for the future. Tell me what your strategy actually was over the last 5 years. They won't describe a forward-looking document.
What will they describe?
They will describe a backward-looking pattern. They'll describe a consistency in their past behavior, regardless of what their original plan dictated.
Hold on. If I walk into a board meeting tomorrow and say my strategy is just whatever we happened to do last year, I'll get laughed right out of the room.
You probably would.
So how does looking backward help an MBA candidate plan for the next quarter?
It helps because it forces you to acknowledge the difference between what you intend to do and what actually survives contact with the real world.
Oh, the real world always gets in the way.
Always. Strategies can certainly be we call those deliberate strategies. You make a plan and you execute it step by step.
The classic military model.
Right. But in business, plans often go unrealized because markets shift. So more importantly, strategies can be emergent. This happens when a pattern of behavior emerges over time without any strict preconceived plan.
So an emergent strategy isn't just failing to plan, it's adapting on the fly.
Precisely. The text gives a brilliant example of this. Imagine a company that buys a single, somewhat rundown urban hotel.
Okay.
It's not part of a grand corporate vision. It's just one opportunistic investment.
Yeah.
But then, a little later, they buy a restaurant nearby.
Makes sense.
Then a seasonal resort, then another hotel with a restaurant attached. They take it one step at a time, testing the waters, learning what works.
Building slowly.
Suddenly, over a decade, a clear pattern emerges. They haven't just bought random properties. They have built a massive hospitality empire.
Wow.
They didn't start with a boardroom master plan to dominate the industry, but a highly effective strategy emerged through their iterative actions.
That completely flips the traditional script. You're saying real-world strategy is rarely a pure top-down plan.
Purely deliberate strategy means there is no learning along the way. You are rigid.
You break when the wind blows.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But purely emergent strategy means there is absolutely no control. You are just drifting.
So what's the middle ground?
The most effective approach for a modern organization is what the text calls an umbrella strategy. The broad outlines are deliberate tank. Leadership sets the general direction, but the specific details are allowed to emerge as the teams learn from the environment.
Like a tech company.
Exactly like a tech giant. Think of Google. The deliberate umbrella strategy was to organize the world's information. But within that umbrella, they allowed engineers to experiment, which led to the emergent creation of products like Gmail. You have to balance control with learning.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because that distinction between intended plans and emergent patterns is huge. But the book doesn't stop there, right?
Not at all.
It introduces multiple definitions of strategy. There's this whole debate about what kind of shift a new product actually represents.
Yeah, the authors use McDonald's and the introduction of the Egg McMuffin to illustrate how slippery strategic definitions can be.
The Egg McMuffin.
When McDonald's introduced it, it was a massive commercial success. But if you ask business analysts what kind of strategic shift that represented, you get two totally different answers.
Why is that?
Well, one camp will say this was a bold change in position. McDonald's strategically entered a brand new, highly lucrative market, the breakfast market. They're looking outward at the product and the customer.
Outward looking. Finding a new niche in the market landscape.
Like the other camp will argue it wasn't a shift at all. They'll say it was exactly the same perspective.
How is a new market the same perspective?
Because it was the classic McDonald's fast food system speed, intense standardization, low-cost paper, just wrapped up in a slightly different package for the morning crowd. They are looking inward at the organization's deeply ingrained culture and way of operating.
So we have plan, pattern, position, and perspective. We are up to 4 different definitions of strategy, all starting with the letter P.
To synthesize this, the text formally lays out the 5 Ps of strategy. It is a vital framework for any student of business.
Let's run through them.
Number 1, plan. Strategy as a conscious, intended course of action.
Got it.
Number 2, pattern. Strategy as consistency in behavior over time, whether intended or not.
Like the hotel empire.
Exactly. Number 3, position. Strategy is locating specific products in particular markets.
The breakfast market.
Right. Number 4, perspective. Strategy as an organization's deeply ingrained worldview and culture.
Fast, cheap, standardized.
You got it. And there is a 5th P, which is often the most overlooked, but occasionally the most effective.
I remember reading about the 5th one, and it feels a bit, I don't know, devious compared to the others.
It is a bit devious.
Yeah.
Number 5 is ploy. Strategy as a specific tactical maneuver designed purely to outwit a competitor.
A trick, basically.
A trick. The book offers a very visceral anecdote to explain this. Imagine a kid who is being chased down the street by a neighborhood bully.
Okay, I picture it.
The kid purposely veers off and jumps over a specific fence. He doesn't actually want to be in that yard. He jumps the fence because he knows there's a vicious Doberman waiting on the other side.
Oh, wow.
The strategy isn't the jump itself. The strategy is the trap.
That's a great visual, but how does that translate to a Fortune 500 company? They aren't exactly jumping fences to avoid bullies.
In the corporate world, a ploy might look like a massive telecommunications company buying up a huge plot of land near a rival's headquarters and publicly announcing a fake expansion.
A fake expansion.
They have zero intention of ever building a factory there. They just want to scare their competitor into abandoning their own expansion plans out of fear of market saturation.
That is devious.
The strategy is the bluff. It's a vital concept because it reminds us that strategy isn't always about grand, noble visions. Sometimes it is just a tactical sleight of hand to gain leverage.
So we have the 5 Ps: plan, pattern, position, perspective, and ploy. With all of these angles, it feels like having a formalized strategy is an absolute non-negotiable mandate for any company.
You'd think so.
But is that actually true? Is having a tight, well-defined strategy always a universally good thing?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, that brings us to one of the most sobering lessons in the entire book. Every single strategic advantage carries with it a deeply dangerous disadvantage.
A double-edged sword.
A double-edged sword. The authors lay out 4 profound paradoxes or trade-offs that you must internalize. The first trade-off is that strategy sets direction, but it also creates blinders.
The compass analogy makes sense. Strategy helps an organization navigate complex environments. Everyone knows which way north is, so you don't have thousands of employees running in different directions.
But the inherent danger is that setting a predetermined, rigid course in unknown or rapidly changing waters is the absolute best way to steer your ship directly into an iceberg.
You just stop looking for icebergs altogether.
If you are too locked into your direction, you lose your peripheral vision. Think of companies like Nokia or BlackBerry in the late 2000s.
Oh, yeah.
Their strategy set a clear direction based on physical keyboards and hardware durability. But those exact strategies became blinders that prevented them from seeing the touchscreen smartphone revolution coming from Apple.
Taking that a step further, the second trade-off is that strategy focuses effort, but it also causes groupthink.
Yes.
You want everyone pulling the rope at the same time to maximize impact. But if that focus becomes too intense, it completely kills any openness to alternative possibilities.
That is the peril of institutional alignment. The strategy becomes so embedded in the fabric of the company that anyone suggesting a different approach isn't just seen as wrong. They are seen as a heretic.
Yikes.
Which leads to the third trade-off. Strategy defines the organization, but it also stereotypes it.
Stereotypes it.
A good strategy gives your people meaning and a clear identity. It tells the market exactly what to expect from you. But defining an organization too sharply oversimplifies its rich internal complexity.
It boxes you in.
It reduces a dynamic system to a flat caricature, making it incredibly difficult to pivot when the market demands change.
The fourth paradox might be the most challenging one for an established company to navigate. Strategy provides consistency, but it stifles creativity.
The ultimate struggle.
We obviously need strategy to reduce chaos. You can't wake up every single morning and reinvent your entire supply chain and business model.
You cannot. But the text pulls in a brilliant quote from Ralph Waldo Emerson. A foolish consistency is the hobgoblin of little minds.
I love that quote.
It is a phenomenal inclusion because creativity, by its very nature, requires breaking the rules. It requires finding irregularities, taking risks, and forming new combinations.
The classic example there has to be Blockbuster and Netflix, right?
Perfect example.
Blockbuster had incredible consistency. Their strategy was perfectly optimized for late fees and physical retail locations. They were so consistent that when they were presented with the opportunity to buy Netflix or pivot to streaming early on, they couldn't do it.
Their consistency completely strangled the creativity they needed to survive the digital disruption. And it brings us to a conclusion from the text that often shocks MBA students. Sometimes, the absolute best strategy for a firm is an intentional absence of strategy.
Wait, a lack of strategy can be good.
Yes.
That sounds like absolute heresy in a business program where we spend 2 years learning how to build strategy decks. Are there any major companies that actually pull that off?
The book highlights Nucor, a major American steel production company. Nucor became incredibly successful specifically by shunning formal, top-down planning systems.
Really? A steel company?
A steel company. They did not want giant binders full of 5-year strategic plans dictating their every move. Instead, they relied on raw flexibility.
How did that work in practice?
They empowered their frontline workers and plant managers to act consistently in the moment, adapting to local market conditions organically. They proved that formal strategy can sometimes just be a highly specialized recipe for bureaucratic rigidity.
So they just stayed nimble.
By avoiding the heavy machinery of strategic planning, they stayed nimble enough to outmaneuver massive, slow-moving competitors who were paralyzed by their own blueprints. It's a powerful reminder that strategy is a tool. It serves the organization. The organization does not serve the strategy.
Man, for someone sitting in a strategy seminar tomorrow, knowing that strategy is this massive contradictory concept where having one can blind you and not having one might save you is slightly terrifying.
It can be daunting.
How does Mintzberg suggest we actually make sense of all these competing definitions and paradoxes? How do we map the elephant?
The author's solution, and the core premise of the entire strategy safari, is to break the beast down into 10 distinct schools of thought.
10 schools?
They reviewed decades of management literature, thousands of articles and case studies, and realized that practically all strategic thinking over the last half-century falls into one of these 10 categories.
And there's a fascinating psychological justification for why they chose the number 10, isn't there?
There is. They reference George Miller's famous psychological principle, the magical number 7, plus or minus 2.
Right.
It is the theory that the limit of human cognitive processing, the number of distinct chunks of information an average person can comfortably hold in their short-term memory, is around 7.
We have 7 days of the week, the 7 deadly sins, the 7 wonders of the world.
Exactly. But the authors playfully argue that since people interested in strategic management are clearly not ordinary mortals, our cognitive capacities can handle a little more.
We're special.
We can handle the magical number 7, plus 3. Hence, we get 10 distinct schools of thought to categorize the jungle.
I appreciate the flattery from the authors. So, what is the lay of the land? How do these 10 schools divide up the territory we're going to be exploring in this series?
We can group them based on their fundamental approach to the elephant. The first group focuses heavily on the formulation of strategy, how it should be deliberately crafted in an ideal world.
Formulation.
This includes the design school, which sees strategy as a process of grand conceptual design led by the CEO.
Like an architect.
Then there is the planning school, which views it as a highly formal, systematic process driven by budgets and spreadsheets. And the positioning school, which treats strategy creation as a deeply analytical, data-driven process of finding the exact right niche in the market landscape.
So design, planning, and positioning are the formulation heavyweights. They are the boardroom architects. Where do we go from there?
We shift away from the spreadsheets and into the minds of the leaders. The entrepreneurial school focuses purely on vision.
Ah, the visionary founder.
It sees strategy as a deeply personal process, locked in the intuition of a strong founder. Next, trying to unpack how that founder's mind actually works, is the cognitive school. This treats strategy as a fundamental psychological process, looking at how biases and mental maps shape our business decisions.
That brings us to 5 schools. We are halfway across the elephant.
The next group focuses on how strategy actually emerges organically in the messy real world. We have the learning school, which argues that strategy is a process of continuous adaptation and trial and error.
Adapting on the fly.
Then the power school, which strips away the idealism and views strategy as a gritty process of negotiation, corporate politics, and maneuvering for influence.
The power school sounds like a corporate merger negotiation where everyone is just trying to protect their turf.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Contrasting that is the cultural school, which sees strategy as a collective, cooperative social process grounded in shared values.
So culture as strategy.
Yes. And the environmental school, which argues that strategy is largely an illusion and that organizations are just reacting to external forces completely outside their control.
Learning, power, cultural, environmental. We are up to 9. What is the final piece of the puzzle?
The 10th school attempts to wrap its arms around the entire beast. It's called the configuration school. This school tries to synthesize everything, viewing strategy as a process of episodic, total organizational transformation. It looks at how organizations settle into stable, predictable states for years, and then, triggered by a crisis or a new leader, dramatically leap into entirely new configurations.
10 schools. 10 totally different lenses through which to view the exact same corporate challenges.
And it's vital that you keep our fable of the blind men in the forefront of your mind as you study these. Each one of these schools is just one blind man touching one part of the elephant.
Right.
The planning school is holding the cusk and shouting about formal risk analysis. The cultural school is holding the ear and preaching about collective identity.
They're all partially right.
Each perspective is unique, and each has generated incredibly valuable insights, but each is also profoundly limited and prone to massive exaggeration if taken in isolation. You cannot understand the reality of business if you only listen to one blind man.
Which sets up the ultimate challenge for the listener. If you want to not just survive, but lead in the corporate jungle, you can't just pick a favorite school and ignore the rest.
No, you really can't.
You can't just declare yourself a positioning person and ignore company culture, or a learning person who refuses to look at the financial plans.
True strategic mastery requires the exhausting, exhilarating ability to synthesize all 10 of these opposing perspectives. The text concludes the chapter by invoking a brilliant quote from F. Scott Fitzgerald. The test of a first-rate intelligence is the ability to hold two opposed ideas in the mind at the same time and still retain the ability to function.
Fitzgerald says a first-rate intelligence can hold two opposed ideas. For you, the MBA candidate, if you truly want to be a master strategist, your challenge is to hold 10 opposed ideas in your mind at the exact same time and still be able to lead an organization effectively through the fog.
Exactly.
You have to know when to plan meticulously, when to adapt on the fly, when to leverage political power, and when to rely on your cultural foundation.
It is a remarkably demanding standard, but it is the only reliable way to see the whole beast.
And that is exactly what we are going to do together in this special series. We are going to examine every single part of this elephant, chapter by chapter. I am explicitly inviting you to return for our next deep dive. Grab your machete, because we are hacking our way into chapter 2, where we will explore the very first blind man, the design school. We'll look at how the concept of strategy as a grand conceptual architecture took over the business world and where its fatal blind spots are.
This raises an important question to leave you with, something to mull over before your next seminar. We've spent all this time talking about strategy as an elephant, a massive beast navigating the solid terrain of the business world. And we spend all our time in business school figuring out how its legs and trunk work on land. But what happens to the organization when the business environment suddenly drastically changes? What happens when the solid ground turns into an ocean? Can the elephant learn to swim? Or does the true master strategist need to recognize when it's time to stop trying to change the elephant and instead find an entirely new beast?
Now that is something to keep you awake tonight. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and we will see you back in the jungle for chapter 2.